Welcome to the Biz Dad Podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original Biz Dad himself, Adam Labar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the Biz Dad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur. And now, here's Adam.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Biz Dad Podcast. Today we have on Tim Vest. He's an entrepreneur, a dad, hence, he's on the Biz Dad Podcast, right? An entrepreneur and a dad. Makes perfect sense. But let's start off just, Tim, you telling us a little bit about yourself, telling everybody who it is that we're talking to today, your family, your business, or businesses in your case, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me on. So Tim Vest, got a few different things that I do. I have a company called Harvest Properties Group that I founded a while back. It does, we purchase and operate real estate, mostly in the multifamily and triple net space, and primarily in the Carolinas, since that's where I'm located. So North, South Carolina, and Georgia is where we mostly do what we do. I'm also a co-founder of Makin Real Estate Coaching with my business partner, Tim Vitale. We coach folks on real estate, kind of getting that first big deal across the finish line, if you will. And then one of the other things that I own, so I have a podcast and a small group called Barbaric, Yawp, that I founded, that's focused on just kind of, working with folks, kind of getting through the entrepreneur world and kind of making your own voice known, if that makes sense.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's one thing that, so like me being prior military, that's all I did before I learned about entrepreneurship much later, like realizing why I was doing what I was doing in the military, but I had no idea where to go and like, how do I make my voice in this world? What do I do? Like, so it's just kind of like groups like what you and I are in, Go Abundance, has helped out with that and just kind of talking to other folks. But I'm definitely going to have to check out the podcast and learn some more from you on that one. But
yeah.
And I'm going to have to ask you about your logo later, because I'm going to talk to you about including your kids in business. And it just so happens you did that with this. So
I did.
All right. One other thing that I always like to ask is to tell us a little bit about your dad, kind of how you grew up. One of the things that I like to think through is we all have kind of a wireframe in our brain that was built over the years of us living, and anytime an experience happens, we go back to that wireframe, and whether that's good or bad, sometimes we have to adjust it. But like, where did your wireframe start? How did you kind of start your fatherhood experience by dealing with your father? Tell me a little bit about growing up with your dad.
Yeah, so my dad's a Carolina guy. Like, our family's been in the Carolinas since the early 1800s. My dad grew up on the farm. His parents were rather poor, sharecroppers. He used to drive us around and show us the houses he grew up in, which were really like sheds or small one-room barns and stuff like that. So, as a kid, I can remember kind of driving around the roads in North Carolina and having my dad show me these things. And I started to develop a real understanding of the kind of guy he was, right? He went to some small school. I think he was 15th out of 16 kids who graduated. And he would have told you, hey, without my mom, he would have never gone off to college. He just didn't have that wasn't a goal for him, right? Like, that wasn't even something he thought was possible, but he was first person in his class, first person in his family to go to college. Same thing with my mom. And, my dad was an extremely hard worker. For a guy that graduated 15th at a very small high school, he, out of 16 kids, he ended up with, like 3 bachelor degrees, 2 graduate degrees. He had a degree from Carson Newman in the seminary. He was a Southern Baptist minister for quite some time. He was involved with the police force. He was a police officer, and then he ended up being a teacher.
Wow.
For most of the time that I spent with him, he was a teacher in the vocational programs. I don't think a lot of people know that high schools used to have vocational programs where they would teach kids how to be a mechanic, work on washing machines, that kind of stuff. So my dad would help kids find jobs, the kids that probably weren't going off to college. He would kind of educate them on those types of things and then help them get some sort of vocational track going on. My dad was always really, really strongly involved with the community, always involved with the church. He was the kind of guy like that. He would leave on Saturdays at like 10 a.m. to go check the mail. The post office was 2 miles from our house, and 4 hours later he'd come home. And it's because he had stopped at the post office, talked to the guy behind the counter for an hour, and went somewhere else, and somebody else talked to him. And that's just the kind of guy he was. So, I grew up seeing that. And then the other thing I grew up with is, my buddies used to kid me because they'd ask me about, hey, did you see Looney Tunes or whatever on Saturday? I'm like, man, I don't watch cartoons on Saturday. My dad gets me out of bed at like 6 a.m. and we're in the woods cutting wood and splitting firewood for people and delivering loads of wood. We didn't have, my parents were teachers, so we didn't have much. And that was like one of the ways my dad made money. Doing wood. We'd go down to the beach, the North Carolina beaches in the summer, and build decks for people to make extra money. We would do kind of like small little side construction jobs around town to make extra money. And it was that kind of stuff that I think kind of started to develop my entrepreneurial side, to develop my little side hustle side too, as well. I've always looked for, because of that, I've always been looking for like different ways to like supplement income, or like, hey, I can do this over here and make a couple $100. But it also taught me, I learned a lot of things too. Growing up, I learned how to cut wood. I learned how to build decks. I learned how to, frame, do framing, do drywall. Oddly enough, my dad used to stick me with the drywall work. We'd put the drywall up and then we'd mud it, and he'd say, I'm getting ready to run to the store. Why don't you start sanding? And, he'd come back 2 hours later. I'm covered head to toe in drywall dust. And I'm like, I guess I'm done,
That's funny.
So we used to do that kind of stuff all the time. One of the other things I saw, I was a little young for this, but I do remember it, is, again, I mentioned we didn't have a whole lot. We were pretty poor. My dad wanted, us to have our own home. So he bought these books. I still have them in, my other office in my house. It was these construction books, and it's like 22 volumes. And he read these books and then built our house from the ground up. It was basically a summer project, a little bit longer than one summer. But, when school got out, we started digging the holes, started digging the place for the foundation. And then he started laying bricks, and the house I grew up in, my dad built. And so that's kind of the guy he was. He and I were really, 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 really close. Unfortunately, my senior year of high school, right about a week before Christmas, my dad passed away. And, that was, if we're talking about, something that kind of shows how close we were, it was a pretty hard time for me. I always tell folks, probably one of the biggest mistakes I made was going off to college that first year, because, man, I was not in the right headspace for that. Right. That's kind of the relation, this kind of speaks a little bit to the relationship I had with my dad. I carry a lot of that forward though, like when I'm doing real estate stuff, some of the flipping I've done, some of the stuff I've done in my own house, I've done a lot of that stuff because he taught it to me. Right. Like I learned that from him. He was one of those guys that I would kind of say to him, I used to get really frustrated with him. I would be like, man, I need to change the oil in my car. And he'd go, well, go change the oil in your car, and I'd go outside and start. And ultimately, I'd run into something I couldn't do. And that's when he would come out and help. But he was always kind of one of those guys like, you go try. And when you run into a roadblock, I'll help you. Right. Yeah. but he always kind of wanted that. He always kind of wanted you to have that. I'm going to start. I want you to try to solve the problem. And then, I'm here to help if you run into something you can't do. So I think that probably sums it up.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I see, sarcastically stating, you certainly didn't learn hard work ethic from your father, right? Like, goodness gracious, that is insane. Like,
man, that guy. So when my oldest brother went off to college, my dad was teaching, 7 to 3 o'clock. He would come home, grab a couple hours of sleep, and then he would head off to the bag plant. And he was a third shift manager at the bag plant near our house. And he would basically work from, I think it was like 10:30 or 11 to 6:30 or 7 in the morning, then leave straight from there and go teach for the day.
Wow.
And it was all to make money to help my brother get through school. So yeah, I learned quite a bit about work ethic from him.
Yeah, no
that's
kidding.
for sure. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I mean, I think that, I don't know, it's one of those that I talk to a lot of people and they're like, well, how am I going to get my kid to have this hard work ethic and do all these things? And especially given the environment. So I grew up in a rather, I don't want to say poor, but we certainly did not have money growing up. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then, so my kids are going to be growing up in a different life, than I grew up in. So like teaching the work ethic stuff. So, I mean, I'm not putting up as much drywall. I'm not changing the oil the way I used to. I'm not doing a lot of this stuff. So it's like, boy, those are such good skills for me to learn. And, so like, how do I build that into my kid's life? And, I don't know, it's one of those that's a constant battle in my brain on what I do want to include and what I don't want to include in my kid's life. And, how to teach it.
I hear you, man. Like, and that's always a balance, right? It's I don't know the right answer to that one. Cause my daughter's growing up way different than I did, way different. She doesn't have duct tape. She doesn't have shoes where the soles are duct taped together because you get one pair for the school year, right? And they got to last. So she's not dealing with that. But at the same time, I think she has a different appreciation for things than I did. Will she ever know how to hang drywall? No. Not at all. She'll never know how to change the oil in her car. I don't know that she needs to, but I think I'm trying to teach her some different things, right? Like one of the things I grew up with, because this was my parents' path, was you go to school, you do well, you go to college, right? That was the expectation. There was literally no other path. And maybe you can appreciate this a little bit, but, I look back on it and that was the path I chose, even after I was dealing kind of with the death of my father. But I look back on it and I'm like, you know what? I could have probably used a couple years in the military after that, that I needed that. I needed that structure. I probably needed that discipline because I was extremely undisciplined for about two years after that. And in my college performance, those first couple of years showed it. Yeah. And so, I say that to say, like, I kind of want my daughter to have a little bit of a different idea of there's no predetermined, preset best path, right? I kind of want her to have a little bit more of, and this is going to sound maybe a little pie in the sky, but I want her to have a little bit more of a, like, hey, it's okay to follow some dreams. It's okay to take some time and go figure things out. My only thing with her is, you just can't be lazy. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you what to do, and I'm not going to have a certain expectation of exactly what you need to do, but you got to do something. You can't be lazy, right? That's kind of the guiding principle that I work with her on. And we'll see how that works. Give me a call in like 10 years. I'll tell you how she's turning out. Right.
Yeah. I don't remember who it was I was talking to, but they told me, you'll have to listen to all the podcasts to find out because it's on one of the podcasts. I don't remember.
There you go.
But he was talking about giving his kids like a runway after graduating, right? So maybe it's 1 year, 2 years. I'll support you for these 2 years to chase those dreams that you want. Maybe you want to go to California and try to be an actor. Maybe you want to, maybe you do want to go to college. Maybe you don't want to go to college. Whatever it is, like, you tell me what it is. Let's plan it out, and I'll support you for those. But after that, you're on your own. Like, these are your years to get your launch plan going and figure out what it is that you want to do and narrow it in. which I thought was a cool idea, especially rather than saving for college and putting it into, one of the college savings plans that I can only use for college, like why not put it into some other investment that I can use to be able to provide for them for that? Because if they don't want to go to college, I don't necessarily want my kids to go to college. If they want to go, then go for it. But if you don't want to go, then I'm perfectly fine not going,
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because that's actually the path my wife and I took is at one point we had an opportunity to say, hey, we're going to sit this aside and this will cover college. Mm-hmm. And we did. We had the is it going to be in a college plan? And I said to her, I was like, but what if she doesn't? Like, I want her to have options. So it's sitting there and it's invested in something, and she knows about it, right? And we've kind of said to her, like, hey, listen, if you go to college, and by the way, if you go to college, it's here to pay for that. If you do go and you do well enough to have it paid for through some other means, it's still here. I consider it yours. And then two, the same thing that he said, which was, hey, this could be a runway for you right after college. If you want to go do something, if you want to go chase a dream or something like that, then it's here. But you're same thing, right? It's like you can't just go float aimlessly in the world. Like you've got to have some sort of path, some sort of goal, right? My wife and I took that same approach with my daughter with sports. When I was growing up, it was like, you play this sport, fall is football, basketball or wrestling, and then you play baseball, right? And we always kind of told my daughter, we were like, listen, I don't care what, back to the same thing. I don't care what you do. I'm not going to tell you what you got to do, but you got to do something. I'm not going to tell you you got to play soccer. I'm not going to tell you got to play this sport or that sport or get involved at these clubs at school. You just got to do something. And so far she's done a pretty good job with that. Nice. Entering into a little bit of a transition period right now, so I'm curious what she's going to do. She's been a pretty competitive, headstrong soccer player for quite some time now. Plays on a really good team, but she's decided that next year she's not going to play anymore. So I'm kind of waiting to see, hey, what's replacing it? What are you going to do instead? Again, check in with me a little bit later. I'll let you know how this is going. It's all an experiment.
I think that's kind of just being a parent. That's kind of what it all is, right? We take what we've learned. That's why that's even why I started this podcast, so I can steal everybody else's experience in their experiment and go, okay, let me try a little flavor of that in this experiment. Let me see what this my hypothesis is, and then test the hypothesis and see if it worked out well with my kids. So
it's funny you say that. I got a buddy who he and his wife are pregnant right now with their first one, due later this year. And when he told me, he was like, man, what advice do you got for me? And I was like, if you don't feel ready, you're probably right there with 99% of us. And I just told him, I was like, just be ready to adjust. That's all I could tell you, man.
Basically. And I'd say you could also share this podcast with him so that he can listen to this podcast. And
there you go.
There you go. See,
I remember that.
Yep. Got to drop it as much as I can. Right. But, all right. So what did you go to college for? And why did you choose that? Right. Because you're looking at what your dad did, which is a bunch, right? And he has 3 different degrees, and we didn't even talk about your mom, what she got her degree in, and all that. But what did you choose, and why did you go that route?
Yeah, so real quick, I'll answer that question. So my mom is an extreme overachiever, just like my wife, by the way. My mom she graduated high school 2 years early. She wasn't 15th out of 16th. She was number 1. Graduated high school at 16 years old. Very, very smart.
Wow.
She went off to college, ended up, I don't even know how many bachelor's degrees, a couple of master's degrees, and her doctorate. So highly educated woman, very, very, very strong woman. But I went to college. I started out with mechanical engineering as a dream. That came to a crashing end about 3 semesters in, after a long night in a computer lab, and I looked and said, man, I do not want to sit in front of a computer for the rest of my life. So I transferred into textiles.
Okay.
So I went to NC State, number 1 textile school in the world. North Carolina has, or used to have, a very, very strong textile manufacturing community. I thought I wanted to be in textiles. long story short, graduated with a degree in that and ended up going to consulting and sitting in front of a computer for most of my life. So
as you're sitting here in front of a computer again, yapping with me. So, so when it comes to you've already said that, like, with your daughter, you want to kind of let her kind of figure out what path she wants to go down, right? And it doesn't sound like you went down the same type of path that either of your parents did. So, like, how are you ingraining that into your daughter? Like, what kind of conversations do you have to kind of discuss what that path is going to look like, or what does that turn out to be?
Yes. So, like with my daughter, I think she has the expectation that she's going to go to college. I think she wants to. I think she wants to have that experience, which I'm a big fan of. Like, I'm not one of those guys that's like, you have to go or don't go, it's useless or whatever. I think there's certain things that you experience in college that go beyond just learning and the degrees and things like that. I think being there and being part of that community is huge, and there's something to be said for that. That being said, the conversations my daughter and I have are, hey, this is a path, regardless of if you go down this path or not, we fully expect you to be, around the top of your class in high school. I expect a certain level of performance in high school. And, if my mom watches this, Mom, I'm sorry to say this, but, my mom drove for A's, right? She's like, you make A's. And quite frankly, I was a little bit of like, if I can do no studying and make a B, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. And she did not understand that, because my mom never made a B in her life. Literally, she didn't. And my wife doesn't get it. She never made a B either. And, kind of the conversation I have with my daughter is like, I expect you to have this level of performance, with one exception. If I see you working your tail off and you land here instead of here, okay.
Yeah.
I just got to see that you legitimately gave it a shot and that you tried, right? Like, okay, great. You know what? Maybe math's not your thing. And, you studied your tail off and you ended up with a B or even a C, whatever. Okay. You tried, right? So that's kind of maybe something a little bit different that I do with her than my parents did with me. Because, man, if I came home with a B, it was a conversation, you know? And so that's something a little bit different. We also have a little bit of a different conversation of, I would like you to go to school. If that's not what your dream is, we can certainly have that conversation. I don't expect it. So that's probably somewhere where I'm a little bit different than my parents were with me.
Yeah, I like the concept of I expect A's, but I actually expect hard work more than I expect the A, is what that kind of sounds like. And that's similar to what I tell my son. Like, I want you to get good grades, really do. But if you're working your butt off, and like you said, I care more about the effort you put in, right? Because there was one test. My son just finished third grade, so he's my oldest. He just finished third grade, and now he's going into fourth. But there was one test he did not study for at all, and it was very obvious. Like, I got a call from his teacher. Was like, I know you guys just like we were out for something. I think it was the birth of our daughter or something. Like, he was out of school for a couple of days, and then came back in to a test that he should have already known all the answers to. But then he sits down and was like, he got like a terrible grade on it, and he was tore up about it, and it was like 30% of his grade for that quarter for that subject. And I was like, you can't get a bad grade like that. Like that's going to kill your overall grade. But his teacher was like, I should have asked you first, like, which I don't think she should have. I mean, it's on me and him to make sure that he's prepared. Right. But we came home and I said, this is because you didn't try. Let's try. And then we studied. It was literally the next day he went in and got 100 on the test because he tried that night. He studied. He did this. I was like, see, this is why I expect you to try. Certain, like, you're showing me already in third grade that if you try, you're going to do great. If you don't try, you see what happens. So, right. And that's what I care more about is working your butt off and making sure that you're trying. So, yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So trying, and then for me, trying and then ownership. Yeah. Owning it. I've had multiple conversations with her, man, where she's, she didn't make a good grade, and she's like, the teacher didn't teach me this, or blah, 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 or something. And I'm like, hey, listen, own it. Like, you were not as prepared as you should have been. Yeah. Right. and you need to own that. That, and we have that. She's I mentioned she's in soccer and stuff, and I think probably one of the times I've kind of lost my cool with her was we got in the car. Her team does not lose often, but they lost, and she got in the car talking about a play that the goalie missed. She was like, the goalie should have blah 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 done this, and I'm like, I think there's 10 players that kid got through before they got to the goalie, you being one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, that goalie's your teammate. Everybody on this team needs to own that. Because, man, I played sports, and one of the things I could not stand, and my dad wouldn't deal with it either, was, like, first of all, I couldn't stand you not trying hard, and I could not stand when people weren't good teammates, Yeah. So that's probably one of the biggest things with me with her is like own it, right? Try hard and then own it. So
that's one thing I struggled with when I was doing sports was the trying hard thing. There was a lot of fear built up in my head about, well, it's better that I don't try hard so that I can blame it on the fact that I'm not trying hard than it was to try hard and still suck, So, and I don't know how to, because there's still, going back to the thing I mentioned at the beginning of that wireframe, there's still once in a while I'll do that to myself now. It's like, well, I mean, if I just halfway do it, then I can at least say, yeah, I wasn't dedicating time to it. So that's why it didn't succeed, or that's why this didn't happen. But, well, then why the heck do it at all? Right. I mean, and that's I don't know how that's going to play out with my kids. I don't know. Because I'm thinking about it just now. I don't really know what that, for now, like what I'm trying to do is just make sure, again, that my kids are working their butts off if they're trying on something. I mean, especially the 8-year-old. Yeah. I mean, he's at a level right now because we got an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time of this recording. So it's like the 4-year-old is still kind of just learning how to be a 4-year-old. The 8-year-old is kind of a little bit more on the track on things. But I really wish that I tried harder when I was a kid on various things. I did the same thing in school. If I could pass and not do anything, then that's what I was going to do. But I wasn't like that in the beginning, like 7th, 8th grade. I was like 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. 9th grade is when I kind of started getting a social life, and that's when it all just kind of, I was like, well, this is so much more fun than studying or working hard at school. And, so I don't know how I'm going to get to that when a kiddo gets down that route. But
but man, I think that's part of being a kid, right? Like, I mean, So as much effort as I would give sports, and then like I never thought twice about going and working a 15-hour day with my dad, hammering nails or something like that. But yeah, I mean, school was not something that like I interested me. Like I never, like I was good at it without trying too hard, but I never kind of wanted to do what they wanted me to do. Right. Like even today, like I'll pick up and read books, but I want to read what I want to read. If you give it to me and say, you have to read this, I'm probably going to struggle with that. But man, I'll read all day long stuff that's interesting to me. Yeah. And I, even back in school, I would too. You give me All Quiet on the Western Front, I'd read that thing left inside and out, right? But you give me Great Expectations, I'm like, come on, like really?
Yeah. I recently just started thinking that way with my son, because I had a couple books that I bought for him and tried to say, hey, we'll read these, and it was like, well, why the heck are you doing, like, what books does he want to read? Like, you're turning this into school at home. And, and we've got, he gets these little engineering things that come in the mail every month that he gets to put together, but I've got them on top of the fridge. And I said, well, you have to read 50 pages to earn that, to be able to go and build this fun science thing, right? So then he'll knock out 50 pages and then go and grab it. But it's so much easier when it's a book that he actually likes, where he'll sit down and smoke through it. But I started with like, hey, you got to read 50 pages of this book. And that wasn't as... let's just say I had multiple of them sitting on top of the fridge that he would not read for like a month. He's like, I'm not reading that book. Like, it doesn't interest me. But now, he's reading a book that he wants to read. So it makes it a little easier. So
it's funny how that works, man. My mom used to, during the summer, pay me if I read books. Like she's like, hey, if you read this book, it's like $1 or something like that. But I would literally look at it and go, hey, Dad, what can we go do? Like, can we, again, I'd rather go sweat in the woods, cutting wood and stacking wood in the truck than like, he'll pay me $5 to go do that for a day. My mom would pay me $1 to read a book, and I'm like, I'd rather go do that.
I remember cutting firewood up in New York. It was semi-off subject, but like I did that with my dad all the time in upstate New York. When the same thing, he'd have some side jobs going on, and up there it was for everybody in the winter throwing it in their wood stove, and getting all ready. So we'd be out there in the snowing and blowing and cutting trees down, and I'd be out there timber because I'm a kid and having a blast just cutting things down, not getting paid a dime for it. I just thought it was a lot of fun because I love being outside and as much as I could get time with my dad, which wasn't as often. So. Yeah, those are fun times. And I brought the kids out to like cut down the Christmas tree and stuff. Is about the most that they've ever experienced in that type of a situation. So.
Does the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation scene, when they're like off doing that, does that bring back memories for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Same here.
It certainly
Same
does.
Here.
Yes, very much so. I love that. Now, that's one of my favorites. So when I was deployed to Iraq, my sister had actually mailed me that movie along with a care package. Like they like this whole thing of Gatorade powder that nothing got there until like January or early February. So it never made it for Christmas, but the Gatorade powder busted open, so I had Gatorade everywhere inside of this package. And then there was this movie. So then I watched that movie every year for Christmas, but that year I just happened to watch it in like January or February because I didn't get it in time for Christmas. But that's a mandatory, and it brings back a lot of memories rather often.
Oh, Man, I tell my daughter all the time, I'm like, man, this brings back memories like every Christmas. Because, again, we weren't going to a lot to buy a tree. We didn't have the money. So we would go out to the old family farm and start traipsing through the woods, man. Didn't matter if it was hot, cold, whatever. Start traipsing through the woods looking for a tree. And we had some of the worst Christmas trees. I mean, I remember a couple. I'm like, Dad, I don't even think that's legitimately a Christmas tree. Like,
but it's a fir. Just all that matters.
And down here, it's a pine of some sort, right?
Yeah. That's funny. But, so I don't know how we got on Christmas, but
I don't know either.
Whatever. That's all right. So sports wise, do you soccer right now? What would you like to see her do, and what do you think she's going to do next?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I will tell you, I'm kind of going through this mode where I'm still holding out hope, right? I'm holding out hope because she's actually a pretty darn good little soccer player. Yeah. She's 15 and she's starting to get like colleges inviting her to their camps and stuff. But she's just kind of done with it. She loves it. It's like she will sit down with me and watch a soccer game, which, by the way, like there was no soccer around when I was growing up. So until she started playing, I had zero interest in watching soccer. It just looked like a bunch of guys kicking a ball around the field for the longest time. Now I have an appreciation for it because I've watched her play. I understand, there's strategy behind this. I get it. Okay. But as far as like what's next or what I want her to do, I really don't know. There's a part of me that would love to see her pick up an instrument. I've even told her, I'm like, hey, I tell you what, if you go, because you not doing soccer actually impacts me, because left to my own devices, I'll sit in this office and work 18 hours a day. I was like, so at least right now there's this aspect of I have to stop to get you to soccer practice, right? And I'm like, if that goes away, I need something else. So I actually told her, I was like, she had mentioned piano at one point, and I was like, tell you what, go find us piano lessons. I'll actually take them with you. And I think she backed off that a little bit. I don't know if that's because I offered to take them with her.
So I don't want you to be there. I'm trying to do soccer to get away. Like,
yeah, that's possible. So me personally, I want to see her get involved with some clubs at school. I would like to see her kind of. She's really artistic. I'd really like to see her kind of chase that a little bit. She seems to have a real passion for it, and she's good at it. So I'd like to see her maybe do something with that. But again, I'm going to leave it up to her to see what she does. Now, obviously, like we talked about before, nothing is not an acceptable answer. So if I find her not doing something, then I'll start to choose things for her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it'll probably be something with you. You'll be stuck doing piano with me. That's what. Yeah.
She's gonna learn to go cut wood in the woods.
There you go.
And maybe we'll change oil on the Bronco. I don't know.
What kind of Bronco do you have? Like newer, older?
I got one of the newer ones. It's like I told the guy who gave me a little bit of a hard time. He's like, you should have bought an older one. I was like, I can't afford an older one.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah,
those things are $100,000+.
Yeah, the way that they've there's one guy in GoBundance. I'm failing to remember his name right now, but he owns a business that they rebuild all of those and restructure them and do all sorts of stuff. And it's like you can get some really pricey ones. It's nuts.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, have you seen the ones? And maybe he does this. They literally will buy a donor vehicle like an Explorer, rip the body off of it, use the engine and all that, and basically drop the Bronco body on it.
No, I've not seen one of those. No.
Yeah, and if I had my way, it'd be like a '74 Bronco, completely restored. But I'm not in a position yet for that.
Yeah, right now that seems to be the thing that folks around this age are wanting to buy those older Broncos. So it makes the price go kind of nuts, But I had an MG as my first car, a 1979 MG, and I had thought about dropping like like one of the Mustang 5.0 engines in it, and which would totally be a horribly great idea. Like, but I didn't have it long enough to. Sadly, I didn't have it long enough. And now at this point, I'm still looking. Once in a while, I'll get on it and see if I can find one that's in decent shape that I can buy locally. Just because I loved that car. It was so much fun, but it's only a little 2-seater 4-speed. There's not much you can do with it. So, as far as family stuff goes, but it was just a fun little car.
Yeah. Hey, so I gotta call it an old high school buddy that restores cars, and he sent me a picture one day. He's like, "Does this look familiar?" And I'm like, "It's a really cool Nova. It looks awesome." He goes, and we had a mutual friend. He was like, "It was Dave's old Nova." So that was a car that this guy drove when we were in high school, and he still had it. And my buddy Jim got it from him and completely restored it. It's an amazing little car.
Nice. I love restored older vehicles. Like my dad had an old Camaro when I was in high school. I tell people, if people ask me why it is I like to drive so fast, and I said, well, it's because I drove in my dad's Camaro with him all the time. And I thought there's not very many times we got in the car where we didn't go over 100 miles an hour. Like it was just like it was fun. It was like, that was finally a father-son type of thing when we were a little bit more stable. So I wanted it badly. Like when I joined the military, like shortly before I joined the military, he got rid of it. And I was like, come on. Like I really wanted, like it needed to be rebuilt, needed to do all this stuff. But I was in those classes you mentioned earlier, where I was in the automotive classes. We were learning how to do all this rebuilding stuff. We were putting Bondo on cars and doing all this, like learning how to put engines in and using the cherry pickers. And I was like, boy, I would love to do this. This would be a great time. But yeah, he had apparently had one of his coworkers gave their son a Corvette, and the kid wrapped it around a tree and died. So that he was like that happened shortly before I was asking for this car, and he was like, nope, not gonna happen. And then he just sold it. He just got rid of it. I was like, and I didn't know that his buddy had lost a child to a fast car, but I was like, man, I really wanted it. And then when I got an MG, like the opposite of a fast sports car.
You and I have a similar story. We had a '68 Camaro, and my middle brother had driven it, but I mean, this thing was trashed out. I mean, like you could literally start it with a butter knife, and you could see the road through part of the floorboard, that kind of stuff. But and you brought back a memory when you talk about the cherry picker, because my dad rigged a cherry picker. He took an old winch, went over a big old limb, picked up the new engine, dropped it in, drove, basically pushed the car up under it so he could drop the engine in, that kind of thing. And right about I was only a couple of months away from being 16, and my dad got rid of the Camaro and went to a police auction and got me the worst 81 Monte Carlo you've ever seen for like $300 at a police auction, right? Repossessed vehicle from a drug dealer or something. I don't know. And I'm literally like, Dad, what? He was like, well, I didn't think you wanted that Camaro. I'm just sitting there like, are you kidding? I would have loved to have that Camaro. I don't care that you had to like push it to start it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'd put the work into it. It doesn't, you know.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, especially I was getting ready to join the military, and I was an aircraft mechanic at the beginning of my career. I was like my time off, I'm already twisting wrenches. I'll twist wrenches on this. That would be lovely, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it is what it is. What are you going to do?
Yep.
So you said that you had a job, getting back to that a little bit, sitting in front of a computer beforehand after your textiles degree. So how did you go from doing that to running businesses that you're doing now? Like what happened in the middle there?
Yeah. So I've always had a little bit of a knack for just kind of picking things up.
I wonder where you got that from.
Yeah. For instance, the way I got in sitting in front of a computer is my first job out of college was running third shift plant manager at a textile factory in very small Elkin, North Carolina. If you don't know where that is, most people don't worry. But anyway, so while I was there was a piece of software called JD Edwards. It's an enterprise resource planning ERP software that basically runs the entire manufacturing facility, right? And that person who ran it took another job consulting with another company. And they walked in one day, they literally were like, does anybody here understand computers? I'm like, I've done quite a bit with it. So they handed me the manuals to the system and said, go home, read it. We need you to figure out how to run this ERP software. So I literally took the manuals home on a weekend, came back Monday, and I was their ERP expert for the manufacturing facility. And then shortly after that, the person who had been there doing it said, oh, you know the system now? IBM's hiring. They want people to travel around the country installing that software in manufacturing facilities. And it paid like over 2 times more than what I was making.
Nice.
So at 26 years old, I was like, that sounds cool. Yeah, so I did that. That got me into the technology world, doing a lot of consulting. And then somewhere along the way, I ended up working for a financial institution in the Charlotte area, in their IT area. And I ran into this guy who owned properties in Canada and the Atlanta area. And he and I started talking. And I'd always had this real estate idea in my head, because when I worked my way through college, and when I was working at the law firm, one of the senior partners, Howard Twiggs, when they were throwing me a little graduation party, he looks at me, pulls me aside, and he goes, if I could give you one piece of advice, start buying as much real estate as you can now. And, you know, being the smart aleck I was, I knew more than this guy. And I was like, okay, whatever, Howard. So anyway, that was still in my head when I ran into this guy at this job I was at. And I was like, oh, well, tell me more about this. And so he started talking to me about it. I was like, that sounds cool. I think I want to buy some land. So I started buying land and flipping it, and did that for a couple of years, and until we ran into this little thing called 2008 and 9, when the real estate market crashed and burned massively here in the United States, all over the world, really. But that kind of put that bug in me. You know, I saw what real estate could do, and then 2. I've never been comfortable working for a big corporation. Yeah. You know, I always did it because, you know, there was this idea of, you know, like our parents, you know, I'm not sure exactly, you know, when your parents were born, but our parents kind of came up through that. Like, you graduate, go work for some company, you work for them forever. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what they instilled in me a little bit. And so I went through that and was like, hey, I'm going to do this, get the steady paycheck, and I'll run some stuff on the side. But I'd always had this entrepreneurial bug in me. Both me and both my brothers have that. You know, my middle brother went off and started his own business and was wildly successful with it. Worked his tail off. But I've always had that bug. You know, I can't tell you how miserable I used to feel driving to work at 8:00 in the morning. Like, man, I'm getting ready to go sit in my cube, do my thing. You know, the paycheck's really nice. You know, very strong 6 figures, that kind of thing. But man, I hated it. I literally hated it. And I just never got comfortable with it. So that's, you know, these little side gigs I had going on more and more, I was just kind of like, how do I make this like real? Right.
Yeah.
How do I go from side gig to business? Like, I want to make this a business. I want to make this what I do. And then, as you're doing that, I think, I don't know about you, but I started to see it's really not that hard. And sorry to say this to anybody who doesn't feel this way, but it's really not that hard to make money, right? Like, I'm like, there are a million different ways to make money, especially if you're willing to put in the work, and as we talked about before, I've never had a problem putting in the work. So I just had to figure out where to put it in. And as I started to kind of go down that path, I really got more and more miserable with the corporate world, started to see more and more success with my side gigs. So somewhere around 2016, I just kind of said, all right, I'm going to put a real roadmap together on how to get to a point where I can exit my W-2 job. And that's kind of where we ended up.
Okay. So it sounds like your daughter Peyton was born, 2008, 2009?
2008. Yep.
2008, right? So that's right around the time you started looking at real estate, and then she's 8 years old by the time that you decide that that's what you want to do. Was that helpful in part of your decision making? Like when you became a father, like how did that kind of go into your calculus?
Yeah, a little bit. There was definitely this idea of like I wanted to build something to either leave to her or build some sort of legacy to show her. I always kind of feel like my mom and dad's legacy to me has been how to work hard, right? Like how to work hard, how to go after something. Mm-hmm. And then I think, what I want to kind of show her is that you can make your own way, right? Like you don't have to go work for somebody else, right? Like if you got it and you want to do it and that's your dream, go chase it. And don't let somebody tell you that you can't.
Yeah.
And that's, so she was definitely a driving force behind that. And then two, the other piece of it was when I say I was miserable, I was miserable.
Yeah.
And, my wife, God bless her, kind of pulled me aside and was like, you just got to go. Mm-hmm. She's like, you're no good for me. You're no good for her. You go do what you got to do. Right. And, so that was kind of a driving force as well.
Nice. I mean, I think that's first a good on your wife for, saying it and calling you out and like being supportive in that way. Like I would imagine it's a much more difficult thing when your wife's not as supportive. But like, I know that it sucks for you right now, but we still need this or we still need that. And it's just having those conversations and knowing you have a supportive wife is, I would imagine, I know because my wife's extremely supportive too. Like I left the military after a long time. I've been in the military without a retirement. So, and my wife was like, all right, let's do it. Cause she knew that I was in that same boat. I was extremely miserable.
I can't imagine not having that.
Yeah.
Like I'm extremely fortunate. It sounds like you are too. Yeah. My mom was that way with my dad. Like they just had that relationship. It was like, okay, let's do it. Right. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute, we're going to pick up we're quitting our really nice jobs in Texas and we're going to quit and move to North Carolina with no plan, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's what we're doing, right? Yeah, that's what they did. And my wife's that way too, right? I mean, she just kind of looks at me and she's like, I trust you, I trust you. Go do it. And I mean, and we do it. We do that for each other. She walked in, she wouldn't mind me saying this. I remember one day I'm sitting in my office working, and I hear her car because she works. She's very successful in the corporate world. She works, and I hear the car pull in the garage, but she doesn't come in the house. And I'm like, what is she doing out there? So I walk out there. She's literally sitting in the car bawling. She is so sick of her job. She said, it's so stressful. And, she had already kind of said that to me in 2008. I think this was like 2016, 2017 when she was like that. And she walks in the house and she's like, I can't do this job anymore. And I just looked at her. I was like, all right, cool. Don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Do something else. And like everything else, like my parents, it's like, you're not going to quit and then just sit around the house, but get a plan together and let's get the heck out of that thing. Right. Yeah. And that's how we've been with each other. So people who don't have that, I feel really, really bad.
Yeah.
Because because I've had buddies who are like, man, I hate my job, but my wife tells me I can't quit. And I'm like, that sucks.
To me, oftentimes I feel like that's a sign of a lot more other things going on. Like, I mean, there's probably been some lack of communication in various other parts of their life, and they're not as open with each other as maybe they should be. And this is also very generalization, but it's. I think that the healthiness of the marriage creates healthiness in the kids, creates healthiness in the communication. To me, it all starts at the husband and wife. If they're, if they've got a healthy relationship, being able to do all these things, and like the support that they give each other, like makes a massive difference. But there's also a lot of fear-based stuff in there too, right? Like they could have a really healthy marriage and healthy stuff, but if they're full of fear on, well, you can't quit because what's going to happen to this or what's going to happen to that, and it's all fear. Like it might have no effect on it might not be the marriage health, but more just the mental health of each other as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely there for sure. I like to think that I got a decently level head on my shoulders, and a lot of that came from basically being in a very stable family. Mm-hmm. My parents were high school sweethearts, and to the day my dad died, they were nothing but devoted to each other. So, that definitely growing up around that made a huge difference. I think my brothers would tell you the same thing. I think it also kind of set an example of what we looked for, Mm-hmm. I think it absolutely set an example of what we looked for in our own marriages, our own relationships.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's at least you had that as a good thing, as opposed to having to try to find something that you wanted to, because you're either running towards something or running away from something. You had something to run towards, and you saw what it was. So that's good. That's real healthy. Yeah. So going back over to the business side of the house, I think I read in your bio, you didn't mention it out here, but you have have invested in 1,000 doors or so, more than that. Is that right? Did I remember that correctly?
I got a couple of things under contract right now, and when I close on those, it'll put me right around 1,100. So I'm right at 1,000 right now.
Awesome. Yeah. That's phenomenal. And are those majority syndications or joint ventures? How do you have that kind of split up?
Majority of syndications, a couple of joint ventures thrown in there. And as we're scaling, we're starting to do less syndication, more joint venture, mm-hmm. right? Which I think is a pretty typical path. Yeah. But yeah, for now, it's a lot of syndications.
Yeah. I mentioned to a few people, like the syndication front. Like, I've sold properties that were syndications just because they were good for the investors, but I wanted to keep them, but it's like, well, I've got to take care of the investors. That's my job. So let me make sure that I do that. And then after you sell it, you're like, man, it breaks my heart. Like, just didn't want to get rid of some properties,
It's funny you say that. Like, before you and I had a call before you and I did this, and that was a conversation. I got one of the properties I mentioned that we have under contract. One of the guys who was like, well, how do you want to run this? I was like, if I have my way, I want to run it as a JV. And mm-hmm. he's like, why? And I'm like, because I want to keep this one. Yeah. Like, this sits in a really, really rapidly gentrifying area of Charlotte, and I want to keep it. Yeah. And so I was like, if I have my way, if I can structure it right, we'll JV this.
Nice.
Yeah, because I'm with you. I've sold some. I'm literally selling one right now that if it wasn't a syndication, I'd keep it.
Yeah.
But I need to be able to give that investor money back.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's. I'm glad I've done syndications, and I'm glad I've done joint ventures. It makes me. I would rather do I'd rather you and I get together and buy a 10 unit than buy a 100 unit that's a syndication at this point, just because it's like. I'd much rather have the control, have the long-term view on it, to sell it when I want to sell it, refinance it when I want to refinance it, and not ever send another investor email again, But at the same point, if I do syndications, and as long as, to me, it's one of those communication things, right, with the investors, like, okay, well, you better know that, like, and I've told this to multiple GoBundance guys. I'm like, if I ever do syndication, it's probably going to be with a bunch of GoBundance guys that understand real estate, because I'm never sending, like, if you want the P&L, I'll send it to you, but I'm not sending you investor emails. We're going to hold on to this thing for as long as humanly possible. Like, it's a syndication because I'm the one managing it, but dagnabbit, we're not doing a 5-year turn on this thing, a 3-year turn on this thing. We're going to hold on to these. But that's, I enjoy the freedom of a JV and knowing that I get to make all the decisions. Me and my partner.
I agree. And, I think part of, not to get too far off topic here, but I think part of what people have missed on, especially in the last 6-7 years, when I first started doing like real estate in 2006, I mean, there was some flipping to it, but for the most part, real estate back, then was long term, right?
Yeah.
Everything real estate was long term. And truly, if you look at like the ultra high net worth people in this country, they don't sell real estate. They buy it and they sit on it. They just buy it to keep it, and it passes for generations, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I talked to some guys about. I was like, man, over these last 5 or 6 years, everybody got so into this appreciation, let me grab my equity, that it's almost like people forgot that traditionally real estate is something you buy and just hold.
Yeah.
I was at an event a couple weeks back, and one of the guys that was there was literally telling people, he's like, there's multiple ways to tap the equity without selling the real estate.
For sure.
He's big on the whole BRRRR strategy in multifamily and single family. And he's like, man, if I can tap the equity and go buy another one and never dispose of the real estate, he's like, that's the way I'm going after it.
Yeah.
So
that's the way the generational wealth is going to be built too, because you're going to keep holding on to that. Yeah.
That's exactly what he said. He was like, that's how you build generational wealth. And I'm like, there's something to be said for that.
Don't build the wealth by selling it, to build the wealth by keeping it, So I want to keep it. Which is funny because I've sold almost everything because it was a great time to sell, and B, when I was doing a majority syndications, it was a great time to sell. So it was time to sell. And that's like, now I'm over here fiending and itching and like, I need something. So it's, it's rough.
You got that deal need, right? Like, you got to do a deal.
But God forbid there aren't any daggum deals out there right now. Well, I mean, there are, don't get me wrong. There's always deals. It's just a matter of what are you doing to go find them, and I'm struggling right now with everything else I've got going on to go and actually find the deals. So, but so good on you for actually having a deal that you're closing on. Our 2 deals are closing on right now. So that's a plus.
Thanks.
So do you include, I know that, so I'm going to start with the one that I know you include your daughter in on because she drew the logo for it, right? The Barbaric Yawp. Go ahead and switch it over. There it is. Yes. So for those of you who are just listening, you should be on the YouTube one as well. You can see the video and see the logo that his daughter drew. But so besides this logo, what else, or if anything, does your daughter kind of get included on in the business? What kind of conversations do you have about business with your daughter?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'm going to start with probably my proudest moment of when she kind of walked in my office. She has this account that we put money in, and it's one of those things we use. Like, we put some money in it every month, and then like at Christmas, if she gets money, we always have this deal with her of any money you give us, we'll match it dollar for dollar, and it goes in the account, but you can't touch it. Like, it has to stay in the account for a while, right? And somewhere, it was last year. Last year, she walked in. She's like, "Can I see my account?" She just likes to see it from time to time. So I logged in, showed it to her, and she goes, "Man, that's it. Like, I thought it grew. It's not growing fast enough."
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's a savings
at 0.01%. Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, it's a savings account.
Yeah.
And but then she literally goes, "Don't you do things to help invest, like, people make money faster?" And I'm like, yeah, I would say, I'd like to say I do that. And she goes, "I want to do that."
Nice.
Cool. So sat down with her and I said, "Well, this is what I do." And she goes, "I want to do that. I want to invest in one of your deals." I said, "All right, well, if you're going to do it," I said, "this is how we're going to run it. I'm going to do with you exactly what I do with other investors. I'm going to present you deals. You figure out which one you want to invest in." And I did. I presented a couple of deals to her, and proud dad moment, right? Like, I presented her one, and in my head, I'm sitting there going, "This is the one you should get it." I didn't say that to her, but I'm like, "This is," and she looks at it and she goes, "This is the one I want to do."
Yes.
And I was like, all right. She picked up something. Either that or she's just good at math. I put some money with it because there was a minimum investment, which she didn't have. So I put some money with it to hit the number. We created our own little LLC and we invested in that deal. And, she gets, when it does a distribution, she gets hers, it goes into her account. I get mine. And, so that's one thing she's done. So she's invested in real estate. And then, obviously she's helped me with my logo over here. And then what's something else the other thing she's done is part of her volunteer work is I I sit on the board of a family housing nonprofit here in this area. And part of the way she gets her volunteer hours is she volunteers for the nonprofit.
Nice.
So she gets to help out with that as well. So those are some more of the ways she gets involved with me.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, and if she's good at the math, maybe you could teach her how to underwrite. She can start underwriting all your deals for you too.
She uses Google Sheets, man. I'm an Excel guy.
Yeah, I'm an Excel guy. I can't do Google Sheets. It doesn't.
I can't get
I was literally
Google
on a call
Sheets.
this morning with somebody, and she was like, "Oh, could you share that? Put it like, oh, that looks like it's on Excel, not." And I said, "Yeah, I'll try to put it in our Google Drive, but golly, I hate Google Sheets. Like, I just can't."
I do too, man.
Yeah, I think it's just I'm so used to Excel.
And it's funny how the lingo changes, right? Like I'll say to my daughter, I'm like, "Do you do that in Excel?" And she's like, "Sheets, Dad, Sheets." And I'm like, "It's Excel."
It's Excel. Yes, exactly. Sheets was built because of Excel. But man, I've been in Excel for a long time, so that's all I know. It's all I work with, and a lot of the formulas and stuff don't really work as well in Sheets. Or maybe it's just because I'm old and don't like to learn new things. So that might be it.
I think that's part of it. That's certainly it with me. Like, you know what? That's kind of how people are like, how did you know when to get out of technology? I was like, when I became the old guy in the office, like I was like, it's time for me to get out.
Yeah. And I'm not even old, but I'm very old for my age, if that makes sense. And it's like I don't do well with technology. Like I was one of the last people that I knew that got a smartphone, and it's like I've got zero desire to do all of that. Like some of the technology we use in our business. There was a while where we were switching all these different programs in ADPI that I was like, I haven't even learned the first one yet. And now you just threw another one at me and I have no idea what I'm doing. And like, I don't know how to do any of this. Like, it baffles my mind. But, they're like, no, you could easily do it from your phone. I'm like, no, I freaking can't. I can't easily do it from the computer. How am I supposed to easily do it from my phone? Yeah, I don't understand.
Don't feel bad, man. Don't. So I'm an IT guy. I've been doing that. I did that for 23 years and I, so I still got enough in it where I kind of geek out at the technology. Mm-hmm. And I'm always like, I want the latest iPhone, right? And I go get the latest iPhone. And my wife's like, what do? I'm like, I check email and text.
Yep. That's exactly right. I can still do that by hitting the numbers with the other keyboard. Hit the 3 times, hit the 4 2 times.
Yeah, exactly.
So on the real estate front, what do you have any idea what it was about the deal that you were looking at that made her want to choose that one?
The returns were really good.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's ultimately when she looked down and she was like, she understands enough about like average return and the equity multiple. Mm-hmm. That when she looked down and she was like 3x, to the investor. Yeah. She was like 3x is higher than 2x. So she's like, this is the one I want to do. Mm-hmm. Right. Plus it was paying an 8 pref instead of 7, and it was projected to hit 11 in the first year. So she's like, these numbers look good. Yeah. I think that's what did it.
It seems as though she had a good relationship with the operator of the deal too. So that's a plus. When you know, like, and trust the operator, Dad, that does help out, I suppose, right? So.
Yeah, and she had a little bit of an in because I will say we were a little oversubscribed on that one, so I was able to get her in.
There you go. Very nice.
Yeah.
And my nephew kind of said the same thing. Like, I want to learn how to invest in this stuff, right? So I bought all of my nieces and nephews Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I bought it for them in the age level bracket that they're at. Like there's one for teens and that type of stuff. So I grabbed them all and mailed them all to them, and I said, and I've got Christmas money for you, but you can't get the Christmas money until you tell me about the book and tell me what you learned in the book. Then, because the book was for Christmas, I think it was Christmas, and then I had the money set aside. I said, all right, well, I'll send you the money when you tell me about the book. So a little bit more motivation, but he was like, yeah, totally, I'm going to invest with you. And he gave me $20, and it was like, he's probably going to listen to this because he already listened to the other ones. But I mean, the $20 technically just went into my bank account, didn't actually go in the deal at all. But it's, right. Hey, the deal did this that you were putting the $20 in. So this is what you get as your return. And he was like, well, just keep it rolling. You just keep it. I don't, if you're able to double my money in that, then you just keep on going. I was like, all right, well, let's do it.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. I love that.
And it just thinking about it, just having them think about it is the way to go, but.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And my son, he told me when he was like 7, I was trying to talk to him about real estate investing. And he was like, I said, do you think you could invest in that? And he says, I think I can invest $100 in that, Daddy, and he'd go up to his wallet. I was like, we don't need it right now. Wait till I have a deal. And then we'll put $100 into it, So, but I love having those conversations. They're a conversation I never had. My parents didn't, I joined the military because I didn't know there was any other thing to do. Like both my parents were Air Force. So I was like, well, this is just what you do, It's funny because even my dad was like, hey, you should, like my mom and dad both, again, prior Air Force. My dad was a recruiter for the Air Force. And they were both like, hey, you should be an officer. You should be an officer. You'd be a good officer, blah, blah, blah. And then they bring me to the enlisted recruiter, which are two very different things, the officer and enlisted side. And I'm thinking to myself, after I'm in the military, I was like, you guys said I should be an officer. They're like, yeah, you should be. I said, then why did you make me an enlisted person? Why did you bring me to the enlisted recruiter? I need to go to college to be an officer. Right. And I mean, I don't think that they necessarily even knew at that point, what it was that I needed to do. It was just like, no, you wanted to join the Air Force. We brought you to a recruiter. But I don't remember where I was going with that. But so I didn't have, any of that. Like I just did what I saw my parents do. And at this point for my kids, I'd love for them to, if let me change the language on that. I would not love for them to do it, but if they wanted to join the military, totally down with them joining the military. Will I be thrilled about it? I mean, it was great for me. Don't get me wrong, but I want it to at least just be an option for them, not the only option for them. One of the many routes they can choose to go down. So, right. I don't want them necessarily to go into corporate world unless they want to. I don't necessarily want them to be in the military unless they want to. I want it to be, what do you actually want to do with the rest of your life? Like you don't have to choose it today and be done with it for the rest of your life and only do that, but let's make it enjoyable regardless,
Yeah. But the cool thing is just from watching, the kids today, one, I'm starting to sound like my dad, the kids today.
The kids these days.
Yeah. I'm already sounding like it in the car, right? Like I was listening to, I don't know, like Bon Jovi or Metallica or something. And my dad's like got Waylon and Merle on in the background. And he's like, what is this crap you're listening to? And, I'm like, I don't know, better than Jerry Clower, Dad. But anyway, I'm in the car and my daughter's listening to like this K-pop stuff.
I was just going to say something about that. Yeah, I had a feeling that was where you were going with it.
We were in the car. We were in the car for like 20 minutes going to soccer practice one day, and I was like, we get there. I'm like, did we listen to the same song the whole way here? She's, and like I'm legitimately asking. And she's like, no, these were. And I'm like, wow, it all sounded the same.
Yep. Especially because half of it's in another language, so you really can't tell the difference, Yeah. So,
but she's trying to learn Korean, so maybe that's good. I don't know. I don't know how useful that's going to be. I mean, about as useful as the German I took in high school. I don't think I've used it since.
Yeah, I wish that I would have taken Spanish in high school, but instead I took French. And now I've got a wife who's a Latina, and I'm like, well, missed that boat, didn't I? Yep, totally should have gone on the Spanish train.
Yeah. Every time I walk on one of the jobs where we're doing renovations, and I'm like, what did he say? And I got to look at like my project manager to tell me what he says. I'm like, and I pick up like every 10th word, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're talking junk about me right now.
Positive of it. Yes.
Yeah. So I forgot where we were going with this.
It doesn't matter. As long as it's a good chat. Yeah. We just got another au pair. So this is our second au pair that we got. And she's obsessed with K-pop. Like she's 19 years old. She's from Brazil. Big fan of K-pop. And like you just say a phrase, and for me, I'm semi the same way, but it's not all the same genre of music or anything. Like if you say something, like music and movies are like the only things that pop up in my head. So if you say something, it's going to pop up in my head, a music or movie, right? So for her, it's anything K-pop. So you'll say something that she'll just start like dancing in the kitchen and singing this K-pop song. I'm like, I don't understand the K-pop thing, but she found out I lived in Korea for a year, and she's like, I want to go to Korea so bad. Like she's just like. But I don't know, something about that K-pop nowadays. The young girls these days, the K-pop thing. I was like, I don't know. So she showed me pictures that I was like, that dude looks more like a woman than the women pictures. Like, what is going on? They got all this makeup. I don't understand it. I just don't understand.
It's funny we say that because again, we're starting to sound like our parents, right? Because I remember like listening to the 80s hair bands, right? Like Warrant and Winger and all these guys. My dad's saying the same thing. He's like, these guys are wearing makeup on stage. Look at how long their hair is. They look more like women than the women.
Yeah, like, they had the blowouts then, with the crazy hair. Like, oh yeah, well that's true.
Yeah, somebody did that. Somebody did that the other day. It was a K-pop thing, and and they were like talking junk about K-pop or whatever, and he was like the 80s bands, and he was like, yeah, you know, the manly guys like this, and it was like a picture of Poison or something.
Blush on their face and their hair blown out that they took an hour and a half to do in front of
they're wearing eyeshadow, and, you know.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, well, way to make me just second guess myself on that one. Thanks. Yeah, that's
yeah. I go back and I'm like, I was listening. I don't know. I was listening to like Metallica and the Stones, and you know, my brothers were a little bit older than me, so I can even go back and say, hey, I was listening to like Nantucket. And, you know, I remember my brother Steve coming home with the Meatloaf album, the first Bat Out of Hell. So you know, my musical tastes are all over the board.
Yeah, so. Mine are as well. I'm in the same boat. I remember riding on the school, not driving the school bus, but riding on the school bus, listening to that on tape. You know, like we'd give it to the bus driver, like, let's listen to Meatloaf on the drive, right? And it was, and of course it would, that tape probably had barely, or that tape player had probably barely ever been used inside the bus, and it started eating the tape. So you had to get the pencils out and start fixing your rewinding the tape, get it all set up. But anyways, so when what would you say right now as a dad is your biggest struggle that you're going through, that you're willing to put onto a podcast, of course?
What am I like as a dad? What am I struggling with?
Your biggest struggle right now as a dad.
So I'll put this on a podcast, and I'll apologize to my middle brother. I don't think he'd care. I think he'd probably tell you this. So I mentioned, you know, he started a company, very, very successful with it. But you know, I think he'd admit to you that he did that probably at the expense of missing some of his kids growing up. His kids one just graduated college, the other two are in college right now, and he sold his company about 18 months ago. So he's got some time on his hands now, and one of the things he's kind of said to me is he's like, man, I feel like I missed a lot of it. I turned around and they're gone. And like I mentioned earlier, you know, left to my own devices, I'll sit in this office and I will work and work and work. You know, it's just kind of ingrained in me. And probably one of the biggest things I'm struggling with right now is my businesses are doing very well, but they're taking a ton of time, and I need to give them that focus. But at the same time, my daughter's 15 years old. I think I got 3 years left with her here, you know, before she goes off and does whatever she's going to do. I'm really struggling with that. I'm really struggling with, you know, how do I do all of what I need to do for my business and things like that, but still be a dad and not miss these next 3 years. Cause man, once they're gone, they're kind of gone. You know, you always kind of have that relationship, right? But it's not the same as when they're home. So, you know, I'm probably struggling with that right now, if I'm being honest. So the guys in GoBundance, a lot of them were recommending this, I'd have to look it up. I don't have it in front of me. It was this book about like dads and daughters or something like that. Okay. And I read it, and I went through it like that, right? Like I was so like, you know, please tell me something. Give me a nugget of wisdom here. And you know, I think I'm trying to focus on making sure that every day that I prioritize some time, right? Because one of the aha moments for me was one of the things my daughter and I, you mentioned movies. So there's two things my daughter and I really connect on right now, which is movies and sports. And, you know, I mentioned I went to NC State, so she has an affinity for NC State, even though, you know, that's a struggle to pull for them anyway. They tend to defeat themselves more often than not. But you know, we're State fans, so she and I have a common bond there. And during the NCAA tournament this past year, they were in the tournament. I think they were playing at like 1:20 on a Friday or something. And I told her, I was like, hey, you're going to watch the game with me, right? She's like, yep. So we had this plan, you know, Friday of the tournament, first round, and we were going to watch it. And 3:00 rolls around, and I'd gotten into something, and I'm working. And finally at 3:00, I was like, okay, I'm going to go out and watch the game. I walk out there. She's not there. I walked up to her room, and I was like, hey, we're going to watch the game. She's like, Dad, I sat in the living room and watched the entire first half waiting for you. You never came out. So I just went to my room. And I'm like, all right, you're like, that killed me, man. And that was one of those moments where I was like, I got to figure this out. Yeah. I've got to figure this out. So that's, if I'm struggling with something right now as a dad, that's probably it.
Yeah. What, boy. Yeah, I completely understand. That's actually one of the reasons I left the military was a similar conversation that I had with my oldest at the time. And like what gut-wrenching moments now, and my kid was only at that point, like 5 years old when he came and just had one of those. I was traveling a lot, and he just came up and was crying his eyes out, Daddy, 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 don't leave again. And I was just taking the trash out, and I was like, well, this kid, that's all this kid knows is that I'm gone all the time, right? And that's not optimal, And I tried very hard to make sure that, probably at the expense, honestly, of the businesses that I run, to when they come knock on the door, and I even told you before the podcast started, like, walk in, I don't care. Walk in, that's fine. Like oftentimes they'll still do a little knock and like ask if it's okay if I come in, but it's been freeing for me to just kind of be able to just walk out there and say, hey, I'm with you guys. Like but at the same point I catch myself, okay, well, I'm with you guys, but I'm on this, or, I'm with you guys, but I'm thinking about something else. And like that whole presence thing with the kids is really tough because I've got 7,000 other things going on in my brain. Like I'm in the middle of rebuilding some comp things. I'm looking at deals. I'm looking at, where's our fun, Dad? Where's it's just like all the stuff going on. Like, how do we keep it all balanced in our brain? I wish I had a magic answer for you, but just know that you're not the only one dealing with that. That's for sure.
Honestly, man, that helps a ton. Cause I got a lot of answers for a lot of things. I still haven't figured that one out.
Yeah.
I do not know how to balance that, at all. Every single day is a struggle.
Yeah, for sure. It is. And and it also, right now, since it's summer, the kids are home a lot more. So it makes it even more of a struggle because I want to always be out there with them, but I always have to have that conversation and to look at their face where they're like, oh, Daddy's going to work more. It's like, well, yeah. Like, do you like living in a house? Because if you like living in a house, then Daddy has to make money to live in a house. But at the same point, it's like, but you like having a dad around. So I'm like, man, when people talk about the work-life balance, I think I'm not really sure there is such a thing necessarily as work-life balance, but at the same point, there's always going to be one thing that's suffering over to the other. If I do nothing but hang out with the kids, then the business is going to fall apart. If I do nothing but work on the business, then my relationship with my kids is going to fall apart.
Maybe it's the summer thing. You're just kind of bringing a thing up in my head because, like I mentioned, my parents were teachers. So, there was a period of time in my life where they had a lot of time in the summers. Yeah. Now we always had stuff, like my dad was always doing side jobs and stuff. So we always had stuff we were doing, but, we would do vacations, even though we didn't have much money, we would do vacations in the summer. And probably some of my best memories as a kid were those times, right? Like I remember one time we had this old motorhome that my dad had fixed up. I mean, literally, like if you wanted the turn signal to work, you had to do this with the switch, right? Like you had to make it blink.
That's funny.
And, but it worked. And I remember one summer we took like 2.5 weeks. We left North Carolina and we drove up the East Coast and went through Canada and came back down. And, it was all bologna sandwiches in the motorhome refrigerator and water and stuff like that. But I mean, I still remember that to this day. And I was less than 10 years old. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I still remember that trip to this day. And those things, man, like those are the memories I have with my parents. And if I can do some of that with my kid, and maybe one day she'll have fond memories of that, then I think that's a small win. So maybe there's something there, like maybe when they're home during the summer, focusing on just like, all right, these are the days I'll work 6 hours, right? Yeah. And I'll spend some time with the kids. And when they're off at school, I'll do the 10-hour days, 12-hour days then. I don't know.
Yeah, one thing I do love about working from home and doing all this, and right now in the summer, like yesterday we went out, and there's this spot, a couple hours away from where we live that you can go and hunt for or dig for shark teeth and megalodon teeth and all that. Like we found some pieces of megalodon teeth, but didn't actually find like a full one. But like it was a surprise for the kids. We went out there and Adam was like, "This is like the best surprise you have ever given us in my entire life." And I was like, "This is like no way." When I was in the military, would I have been able to just grab a random day and roll out and go do this type of thing? So I think that those. For me, I feel the same way as you were just saying. Like those experiences to me mean the most of growing up. I never went on vacations growing up. I tell people like when I started dating my wife, we went on a vacation to Universal Studios and whatnot in Orlando. That was the first vacation I'd ever been on in my life. But when we moved from state to state, because I was a military brat, we moved from state to state, or when we moved, wherever. We would stop at nice hotels or something. Like there's one hotel we stopped at, this Radisson, that like I will always remember that hotel because it was like the peak of my childhood, remembering like this toucan and mini putt in the middle of this hotel. Like it blew my mind. So those experiences with the kids to me mean a lot more than did I walk out of the office enough? And that doesn't mean I don't want to walk out of the office enough, but am I giving them something that really brings back the memories as opposed to just, things or whatever? Because I could buy them a billion things, but that doesn't mean anything in the long run.
Man, I'm glad you said that, because I'll give you another proud dad moment. It's my only daughter. I'll gloat on her a little bit.
As you should.
So, she was pretty young. Maybe 10 years old. We've always taken vacations with her. We've always traveled with her. And because that's a big thing for me and my wife, is to travel. And at about 10 years old, she walked in and she's like, "Hey Dad, like instead of like stuff for Christmas, can we just take trips?" And I was like, 100%.
Yeah,
I'll do that all day long. In fact, instead of spending $100 on your Christmas to buy you stuff, I'll spend 10,000 to take you somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. And for the most part, that's what we've done. We try to take her on at least 2, probably 3 trips a year. So my daughter's, she's been to Costa Rica. She's been to Costa Rica twice. She's been to a number of places in Europe. She's been all over the United States. She's been to the Caribbean. You name it. And like she literally will tell you, like even at 15 years old, when they're too cool to hang out with their parents, she will hop in the car and jump on a plane with us in a heartbeat and be right there with us the whole time. And we're even like, "You want to bring a friend, if, we'll pay for it. You want your friend to come?" And she's like, "No, I'm cool. Let's just go."
Yeah.
I will say, like in a couple of days, my wife's working, so she can't go. I got invited out to Hawaii for a conference, and I turned around and looked at my daughter. I was like, yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? I turned around, looked at my daughter. I was like, "You in?" She's like, "Yeah, let's go."
Absolutely. Yeah.
So me and my daughter are taking off to Hawaii for a week for a conference, and we'll get some stuff in while we're there. But,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Kind of looking forward to it, man. Like 6 days, just me and my daughter.
I mean, just that smile on your face alone is telling, right? And so the hurt that you were feeling just a little bit ago gets overpowered by the smiles that you're getting, knowing that these are happening. So maybe that is your key to kind of figuring some of this out, is build those little vacations in, build those little plans in, and build those experiences.
So I just got to get her to stop asking for New York City every Christmas.
Gracious, yeah, New York. Like, I've got zero desire to go to New York City right now. That's for sure. That's.
Man, I get it. When I was a kid, right up to about 26, 27 years old, like I loved New York City, mm-hmm. the whole idea, the whole concept, the experience, everything. So I get it. It's just like, she loves it there right now. She really does.
Yeah. It's, I'd love to say it is what it used to be, but I mean, I grew up a lot. I graduated high school in upstate New York. I've claimed New York as home for a long time, but not anymore. I mean, I haven't lived there in like 20 years. So, but New York City was always one of those I'll gladly go and visit, but never want to stay around, and then now I get to the point where I went and visited maybe, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, and it's like, yep, not even sure I want to visit. And now just, I'm just in a different place now mentally. And, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. That excitement that you see on TV and all this stuff. But, you were talking before, I think it was before we started recording, that you hadn't gone to very many of the in-person Go Abundant stuff, but are you going to Vermont?
No, I'm not.
Because there's a Fambundance thing before Vermont that you can, bring the family up there and hang out and, go skiing with the family and, do some family masterminding as well. So those are a lot of fun.
Yeah, I might need to look into that one. I'll take my buddy Dave's advice, like just sign up.
Just sign up. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. I would have already signed up for the Fambundance one if it was open to buy. So I'm already signed up though for the Go Bonus side, and I'll do the Fambundance when that pops up. But it's rough because I got to bring 6 people now, like me and 5 other people. So it's like a whole train of people that we have to fly up to Vermont. It turns into a big to do.
That is my daughter on her soccer team. She's got this one teammate, and she's this teammate's amazing at soccer. Talking about traveling with a clan. There's 8 siblings. Jeez. Like her dad one day was pretty funny. We were like, "Hey, you want to play a pickup game?" He's like, "Yeah, we got our side. Where's yours?"
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. My mom is the youngest of 12. My dad is the second youngest of 9.
Wow.
And then they were like, no, 3's enough. 3, we're good. We're good at 3. So I've got 2 older sisters, and that's it. And then I've got 3, but I've got the au pair. So bringing the au pair around is one of those that. I'll tell you what though, for those who are listening that have multiple kids, if you haven't thought about an au pair, highly recommend. If you have the room in your house, it's a game changer. Like even when we're traveling, I bring her everywhere we go, and we've got a built-in babysitter everywhere. Like that, she takes care of everything with the kids. Like if Raquel and I want a date night while we're out traveling somewhere, I'm like, all right, well, we're going on a date tonight. See you later, and then she's got the kids, and we can roll off and do our thing. So. But you've got one kid that's 15, so an au pair is probably not all that necessary at this point. But
no. If we want to date, when 7 years ago. But now if we want to go on a date night, we just go to date night.
Yeah. Yeah.
She takes care of herself. She and the dogs, they hang out.
How many dogs you got?
We got 2.
I'm a big dog guy, so yeah. What kind of dogs?
We are. So one's a rescue, and most people aren't familiar with this, but in North Carolina, there's a kind of a native breed. It's called Carolina Mountain Cur. Mm-hmm. It's actually a small German. It's basically like a German pinscher that a guy brought over here 100-something years ago and bred them to hunt bear in the mountains. So it's called a Carolina Mountain Cur. We got to rescue one of those, and then we have, just like everybody else in the world, we have a doodle.
There you go.
Yep. We have a mini Bernedoodle. So it's a Bernese mountain dog and a poodle.
Okay. Interesting.
And he's the cutest dog in the world, which is a good thing because he's one of the dumbest dogs in the world as well. But he's got the kindest heart I've ever seen in an animal.
Nice.
So,
that's awesome.
And it may be that he's juxtaposed against her because that Carolina Mountain Cur, her name's Finley. She's probably the brightest animal I've ever seen. She's really, really intelligent, and he's not. So I think the contrast really shows.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah. We had one dog. It was a Dutch Shepherd, and not this here was me in Afghanistan with my dog. I used to be a dog handler. Okay. And so that's a Dutch Shepherd, and we ended up getting a Dutch Shepherd as a pet, and that dog was unbelievably smart. Learned how to not only open doors, but unlock them to open them, sliding doors, pantry doors, refrigerators. I had child locks on our refrigerators before we ever had kids. Like we had to, one day he opened up the fridge and he ate, we had just gone grocery shopping. I bought this peppered bacon with scallops because we make bacon wrapped scallops. We bought 4 pounds of hamburger meat that we were going to separate out, a bunch of steaks, all this stuff. And he got in and ate every single bit of it. Every bit of it. That's when we said, okay, we really need to get a child lock on this thing. My wife and I were like, I don't know what to do. But when we lived in Japan, we had the sliding door that he got in the backyard. We figured out how to open it, and then we locked it, and he figured out how to unlock it and open it, like I was saying. And then, but they also had it in the kitchen, but the kitchen had 2 doors to block it off. Well, we had a babysitter at the house, and she didn't realize that she needed to close the kitchen doors. And so she left one of them open, and the dog came in and opened the sliding door and left the house, walked out the front door. So he's walking around the neighborhood, and this lady down the street sees him standing next to the same exact kind of sliding door while she's cooking food in her kitchen. And she's like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden Tyson opens the door and walks right into her kitchen while she's cooking. She's like, oh my God, what just happened? So yeah, he was a maniac, but poor guy
Well, I'll tell you what, that's crazy. I tell you what though, so my dumb dog is Charlie. I might need to send Charlie your way and let you have a go at him. See if you can't teach him a few things.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to teach him a whole lifetime ago. We'll see.
Man, I've been trying to teach him to shake for 2 years.
Yeah. Some dogs just don't have it.
He does it. But what's funny is he's sitting there looking at you just with this blank stare. And you look over, and my dog Finley, like I'm like, Charlie, shake, and Finley's over there like raising her paw up and down. Just like, I got it over here.
That's funny. Yeah, when I was going through canine school, they tell us those are all dogs that in the military world and anything in the DoD, they're all dogs that had failed out for one reason or another, but yet they're still good. Like if they're on the attack side of the house, they may not have done very well in detection. If they're on the detection side of the house, they may not have done well in the attack world, just in general, right?
Yep.
So, but when you're over there doing the basic obedience, which is where you start, they have you, first off, you start on an ammo can. So you're telling an ammo can to sit and stay and all this stuff, learning your moves. But then you get to the point with the dogs, when you have the dog, the instructor would say DOWN dog, and then you would say down and tell the dog to down. But half the dogs there, like they hear DOWN dog, and they're like, I know what's coming. They already start laying down, and you're like, no, stop, get up here. You got to listen to me. Stop. So they try to spell it out, but all these dogs have been doing this for forever, and they're like, yeah, I got it. Like I know that I'm going to be laying down. So,
we used to do that. If my dog Finley hears walk, she goes crazy. Like she loves to go for a walk, and we used to, hey, are you ready to WALK the dog? Same thing. Yep. Like after a little while, she's like, oh, I know what that means. So I'm going to go crazy.
That nephew I talked about earlier, he created a name called skadoosh. So that's what they call a walk for the dog. Like we got to do a skadoosh, and that dog hasn't caught on yet. They're going to have to make up another name. I don't know where skadoosh came from, but that's what he decided, and that's what they do. But whatever.
Yeah.
Dogs are crazy that way. You can get me sidetracked by talking about dogs very easily. I'll talk about dogs for a long time. I'm just a big fan.
I'll tell you what, you and my daughter Peyton would get along very well. She absolutely adores the dog. So
I absolutely love it. It's a wonderful time, and my boys really want to get dogs again. We had two of them, and they both got put down within like 6 months of each other, just with some rather rough medical issues. But so now we moved, we've got a kid, and now they're both like, all right, we're ready to have a dog now. We need to have a dog back again.
Time.
What are you doing, Dad?
It's time.
So we'll see. We'll see what we get, but I know we'll get something else.
All right.
So, do you have anything else that we haven't covered you'd like to mention? Anything else you want to talk about?
I got to be honest, man. I could sit here and chat with you all day, but I think we've covered quite a bit.
For sure
for the first one.
Yeah, we'll have to bring you on again to see how the things are going in the future, right? So,
let's try a couple years when she's a senior, and I'll get on and give you some sort of emotional sob story about.
Tell me about all the vacations that you took with her, so that make sure you're doing it. Hold yourself accountable.
Okay, so there may be an Iceland trip coming up later this year too.
That's awesome, phenomenal. You taking the whole family, or how's that working?
Yep, whole family.
Nice.
We get so. Right before we end here, we actually gave her a choice, right? We said, fly into Rome, go around the Mediterranean, end up in Barcelona, fly back, right? Or Iceland. And I was fully expecting Rome to Barcelona from her. And she goes, I really want to go to Iceland.
That'd be awesome.
And I'm like, you do realize that that's going to be a lot of like nature, right? And she goes, yeah, I'm cool. I want to go. I want to see the volcanoes. I want to see the glaciers, all that other stuff. And I think it was freshman year in high school, right? So I think they were learning about different volcanoes and different types of glaciers and stuff. So I think she was really motivated to go see that. So that's where we're going.
That's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good on you. Well, enjoy the vacations, enjoy the time. I'll say that if anybody has any tips for the struggles that you're having or anything, please put them in any of the comments. Whenever this gets released, we'll be able to kind of check it out. But if anybody wants to get a hold of you, maybe they're interested in syndications, maybe they just want to, maybe they're interested in your coaching program. Where's the easiest way? What is the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So, easiest ways on with my email, tvest@harvestpg.com. So that's tvest@harvestp as in Paul, G as in George.com. Or you can catch us at our coaching website at makinmoves.com. Again, just makinmoves.com. That's where you find us.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, we'll have that in the show notes. We'll have all the contact info in there. Hopefully you're able to get a few investors out of it. Hopefully the deals that you're working on right now are going to be stellar. But congrats on the success and the enjoyment you're having as being a dad. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, we'll I'm sure talk to you again soon.
Yeah, Adam, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Tim. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the Biz Dad Podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.